The NHL trade deadline is come and gone. We'll take a look at three teams that made a big impact on trade deadline day and how their moves affect them going forward in the race for the playoffs and the Stanley Cup. All that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. It is great to welcome back to the show the co-host of Locked On Vegas Golden Knights, Chris Gawlik. And Chris, Vegas fans have got to be very happy with the moves made by the Golden Knights. Why don't you break them down? And no team was more aggressive and more active, I think, at the deadline than the Knights.
I knew this was coming. I didn't know Tomas Hertl was coming, but I knew aggression was coming. McCrimmon, I didn't think it should have happened, to be fair. I was on the other side of this thinking maybe this wasn't the year to push everything in. But knowing Kelly McCrimmon, knowing how George McPhee, and knowing what Bill Foley wants, this is not a surprise one bit. So recapping the entire week for Vegas, they traded away a 2024 second, 2026 fourth, 2025 third, 2024 second, 2025 first, their 2023 first-round pick, David Enstrom, and Daniil Marimanov. And that became Tomas Hertl, Noah Hanifin, and Anthony Mantha. And, oh, yeah, the Golden Knights got them for 57.7 of their current salaries. I joke this is the best GM move I've ever seen since Sonny Weaver. Sonny Weaver is the character from the movie Draft Day, Kevin Costner. Sprinkle a little bit of fairy dust on it and make a wish, and that's what happened in Vegas. It's pretty remarkable, and as a fan, as media, as a podcaster, as a father, it's very hard to wrap my head around this and to explain to my son that this isn't normal.
It's not, and I guess this episode could also serve as Vegas's draft preview for the next 2 or 3 years, based on all the picks that they've traded away.
That'll be a very short show.
Exactly. Does it concern you at all that they've traded away so many picks?
No, not really. I put another post if I can find it without. Okay, so here it is right here. So basically, the Golden Knights, as far as their first round picks, they've traded away, and what the players have become. So on the right column, you have David Enstrom, Noah Ostlund. No idea what those fellows are going to work out to be. Frank Vitron, or Joe Veleno, Nick Suzuki, very good player there, Eric Brandstrom, Cody Glass, Zach Dean, Peyton Krebs. Would you rather have that team I just named, or would you rather have this team I'm about to name? Tomas Hertl, Jack Eichel, Tomas Tatar, Max Pacioretty, Mark Stone, Ivan Barbashev. Would you rather have that team of vets who are Stanley Cup winners, award winners, or would you rather have the team on the right that has question marks? We know who Peyton Krebs is going to be. We know who Cody Glass is going to be. We don't know what Zach Dean is going to be. We know Eric Brandstrom is a third D pairing. Nick Suzuki is the one that got away in Vegas. Okay, fine. That's going to happen. Joe Veleno is a good talent. Noah Ostlund and David Enstrom, in 3 years, maybe they'll be something. Right. Who knows? So, yeah. So the Golden Knights are looking for proven commodities versus taking a chance on a lot of unknowns. And a cocky and arrogant remark coming, judging by the banners that are hanging at T-Mobile Arena, they're doing it right. They are doing it right.
Out of the three new acquisitions this week, who do you think will be a rental, if anybody, and who do you think stays long-term?
Well, Hertl is already locked up through a long time. Hertl is locked up, I think, through 29, 2030. God, we're already talking about 2030. Geez.
Wow.
At 6.75 per, the San Jose Sharks ate 17% of his yearly salary. That's just crazy to me that happened. And then now the next one, Noah Hanifin. So Hanifin is certainly the interesting one here. And what's even crazier looking at these trades here, the Golden Knights are on the hook financially for $1.237 million from a totality perspective of his contract. Two different teams took on the contract basically to make that work out. So Hertl is staying. Hanifin is already in discussions at like an 8 times 6 type of deal or something like that. 8 years. I think that's a long time personally, but the point is Noah Hanifin fits into the Golden Knights' long-term plans. Looks like Alec Martinez, whether he plays or not for the rest of this regular season or the playoffs, but given his age, a lot of things, I just don't see a path for where Martinez is a Golden Knight next year. As far as the rental in this situation, it's probably going to be Anthony Mantha. Right now, he's coming in at a 2.85 cap hit, 29 years old. He's due to get a small jump, and Golden Knights got to find a way to pay this Jonathan Marchessault dude who set his career high in goals. He's knocking on the door of the Golden Knights record for most goals in a season that was set by William Karlsson in 17-18 at 43 goals. Marchessault is an unrestricted free agent, and it's crazy that we're talking about all these other things that have happened, but Marchessault still doesn't have a contract.
Will be an interesting offseason for sure in Vegas. So
always
with these 3 deals, how does that change the team's outlook heading down the stretch and as we get closer to the playoffs?
It helps. I'm very high on the situation. I want to be clear about this. But the Golden Knights on Saturday night, they played the Detroit Red Wings. They played a Detroit Red Wings team that got shut out 4-0 by the Arizona Coyotes. The Golden Knights came out shooting very well, basically outshooting for the first 2 periods, basically outshooting the Red Wings about 2.5 to 1 as far as 250%, whatever that math works out to be, almost 3 times as much. But the Red Wings hung around in the game. They hung around. The Golden Knights couldn't finish them. They were having some bad turnovers with the puck. It was not a clean game. And all of a sudden, it's a 2-2 game. Okay, fine. And then it's a 3-2 game. And then all of a sudden, you have bodies flying everywhere. Zach Whitecloud leaves injured in a crazy sequence where Keegan Kolesar and Nicholas Waugh tumble over each other. Now it's 3-3. But then Marchessault does what Marchessault does, and 4-3 and 5-3 and game over. Golden Knights get their first home victory since February the 6th, I want to say. Give or take, it's been about a month since the Golden Knights won in T-Mobile Arena prior to Saturday night's game. So you're asking about the stretch and stuff like that. The trades are important, but the team has had terrible puck management. They've been turning the puck over a lot. Their margin of victory, their margin of error to win a game has been so razor thin, and the Golden Knights have not been doing enough to create puck luck and just everything that goes into that. So, yes, hopefully the new acquisitions will help the team maybe play a more mature game. I don't know if that's the appropriate way to say that, but I think that's how I'm going to take it right now. And things will get better. They're not the team to beat in the West yet. They're not the team to beat in the Pacific yet. That's reserved for the Vancouver Canucks, all respect to their season. But the Golden Knights might be the toughest out come playoffs if they get it together. And, 2-3 weeks from now, when Hertl jumps back into the lineup, Alec Martinez doesn't seem to have a season-ending injury, which is what I originally had thought. Based on the fact they didn't put him on LTIR last night, tells me a lot that I don't think he's going to be gone the rest of the season or the playoffs. Mark Stone and his lacerated spleen, we'll see if he can make it back for the playoffs too. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near the Golden Knights in the playoffs.
Yeah. How about chemistry? How long do you think it'll take to get the 2 healthy players and then Hertl, when he comes back, sort of integrated and comfortable in this lineup?
Well, starting with Hertl, he knows the Golden Knights very well. They see each other 4 times a year, and they've had 2 separate playoff rounds against each other. So, and also, DeBoer's not around in Vegas anymore, but DeBoer did come to Vegas. So just all these things, I think Hertl will be very close to a turnkey type of player once he's ready to go. His injury is the bigger thing more than the chemistry, if that makes any sense. Mantha, I haven't seen a lot from him yet. I'm not saying anything negative about him either. Just it's going to take him a second to find his role. Hanifin right now is very noticeable out there. Very mobile defenseman, 3 assists Saturday against the Detroit Red Wings. He takes chances. He gets back. What I enjoyed watching about Hanifin's game, a little old school hockey, kind of like slap shot, let them know you're there. Players going over near the crease, he's cross-checking them right in the back, getting them out of there and stuff. And he's bringing that physicality to the D-core that you haven't necessarily seen. Maybe aggression is a better word to use. So the chemistry will work itself out. The team has not had a organized practice since the trade deadline. Even the day before the trade deadline, they weren't. I don't think it was a full practice. I think it was a day off that Thursday would have been a pregame skates because that was the Canucks game. Right. Friday, they moved their practice to off-ice activities, probably because of the trade deadline, all the craziness going on. Then Saturday, they had a pregame skate, but it's still not a practice. So there'll be at least one practice before Tuesday's game against the Kraken. That's when I think you'll start seeing a little more chemistry.
All right, Chris, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Yep, catch me and Tony Cordasco Monday through Friday, Locked On VGK, Locked On Vegas Golden Knights, anywhere you get your podcast in on YouTube. Me and my son Christopher do host a special YouTube exclusive show on Saturday morning, so you can skip your Saturday cartoons and enjoy some time with me and my kid doing Locked On VGK. And then you can find me on Twitter at TDChrisG. That's like TD touchdown at TD Chris G.
All right, Chris, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee. So Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. My favorite feature, you can go on the app and see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. And Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts, it is the place to find last-minute tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. It is great to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Lightning, Adam Denker. And Adam, were you surprised by the two moves made by the Lightning on trade deadline day?
Absolutely, Gil. Especially, I don't think anyone even imagined after that initial trade that the Lightning made where they were just basically taking on Adam Henrique's salary. That's really all it came down to in that 3-team trade, that they were going to make a splash like this. You kind of figured, when you start to retain salary and taking on draft picks, that's when you start to kind of nail the coffin of the end of the season for you and your playoff chances. But boy, did they prove everyone and surprise everyone with getting Anthony Duclair, and then a little nice move, picking up Matt Dumba as the trade deadline came to a close on Friday. I think expectations are starting to pick up more in Tampa Bay, and that's crazy to say considering it was probably at an all-time low, and then hours later, boom, people are starting to say, could this team get back on the right track?
Where do you see Duclair and Dumba fitting into the lineup?
Well, Duclair is one of those guys that I said initially when the trade went through that he's one of those guys that's literally been around the block. I mean, he's been on, I believe, 6 NHL teams in 10 years, and he's played with teams that have been very good. He's been with teams that have been very bad, and he could do a little bit of everything, but of course, the one thing that he brings to the table that perks up a lot of people is his ability to score. And he did that in his first game the other night against the Flyers. And he's going to be so instrumental for this Lightning team down the stretch if they are still serious about making some noise in the playoffs. And Matt Dumba on the other side of that is going to add some more depth to this defensive back end for the Lightning. They've just been really, last time I was here a week ago, we spoke about how really it was just that's been such a weak point for this Lightning team all season long. And then you go out and get a guy like that. Is he going to be make or break for a Stanley Cup run? No, but he's going to be the guy that's going to give you a chance and going to allow you to actually have a chance at playing a full 60-minute game. Another thing that the Lightning have failed to do all season long. So he's going to bring veteran leadership, as well as Duclair does, veteran leadership and the ability to give you even more of a chance to win games.
Do you think this is sort of the last opportunity for this core group to make a run?
That's hard to really say. It's one of those things where a lot of these guys, they've been around for what seems like 20 years in Tampa Bay. Stamkos, Hedman, really the two top guys on this team that have been around the longest. Hedman's not having a good year. Stamkos has really been highlighted throughout the course of this year for his limitless with his style of play. And it's one of those things where I think a lot of people within the organization, as well as in the fan base, feel that they are talented enough to kind of make it work down the road as they even start to get a little bit older in age, in terms of, playing hockey, not in life. And it's one of those things, though, where I said on my show, I think it really comes down to both of them. If Hedman is breaking down at a substantial rate and Stamkos isn't going to be able to be productive anymore, it's really one of those things where you're going to have to really put on your big boy pants as a GM and as an organization and make the tough decision. But I think really, to answer your question, I think, if all the cards fall in the right way, you can get maybe 3-5 more years of high level competitive hockey and, get back to that contender status that we've seen them be in over the last 3 or 4 years.
So we're coming down the stretch run now, less than 20 games left in the regular season. Tampa Bay in a very tough fight for those last couple of playoff spots. What are the keys for the Lightning to lock up a playoff spot and then go on some kind of a playoff run?
Well, I'm sure I've said it here on this show when we've talked about what the Lightning need to do on any given night. It really, they have to go out there and win games that they're supposed to win. Best example recently has been the loss that they suffered to Calgary. I mean, that's a game, regardless of, how you're playing at that point in time. You just look at these two rosters, especially with the moves that Calgary made within the last 24 hours prior to that game. You're talking about a team that is really looking for a lottery spot now, whereas the Lightning are still obviously having playoff dreams, and for them to go out and lose that game, especially at home, is really at this point in the season, Gil, unacceptable. And that's really where it starts, is you got to win the games that you're supposed to win. I've said it on my show where if you go out there, especially with this big stretch that they got coming up, they got the Rangers, the Panthers, and the Knights all in a 3-game set. And that's one of the things where, if you win one out of those 3 and they're all tight games that, it just comes down to who's better on the ice, I'm willing to look the other way with that. But if you're going against teams, like I said, that are looking at lottery spots, that are really their season is done, then that's an issue. The other thing is that they really have to focus on, to end the season on a good note and to hold on to a playoff spot, is to really play better in front of Vasilevsky. Now that you got the piece, like I said, all your problems aren't solved. It's not like, okay, Stanley Cup or bust, but it's one of those things now where what you lacked before, that problem at least has, for the time being, been taken care of. And maybe now you could start to play better in front of your goaltender. And I'm going to add kind of like another part to that, is that basically Andrei Vasilevsky needs to play better. The biggest anticipation this year for the Lightning was him coming back after he missed the first 2 months of the season to off-season surgery on his back. And he's shown very little flashes here and there. And unfortunately, him being an average goaltender at times isn't really enough for this Lightning team, especially when, you're trying to justify the money that you are spending on this guy when you guys are basically up against the cap on a daily basis. So a lot of things need to happen for the Lightning down the stretch in order for them to stay on the playoff track. And as we both know, sometimes that stuff doesn't happen perfectly, but if they could get the ball rolling, especially with this big 3-game set coming up ahead of them this week, I mean, anything's on the table.
Tell me the difference about the attitude and the atmosphere in the locker room today compared to before these two deals went down.
Well, it goes back to the veteran leadership. Now, anyone that's been following the Lightning knows, this team has a ton of leaders. They have a ton of guys that have been there for quite some time. But that kind of goes hand in hand with what we're talking about when we're talking about how good Anthony Duclair is that he's, like I said before, he's been around the league he's been in the league since he was 19. And he's been in every environment. He's been in almost every market and any kind of market that you come across this league. And so nothing is lost upon him when he goes into a locker room. And for a guy like that to come in and not only be able to be another glue guy in the locker room, but also be the guy who could come in and help you produce offensively, that's a huge intangible. As well as on top of that, him and Matt Dumba are super close. So,
right.
There's going to be no misconceptions about, anybody being on whatever page that they need to be on, because the two guys coming in, they're close. Some of the guys, are very familiar, obviously, with Anthony Duclair during his time in Florida with the Panthers. So there is that familiarity there as well. So I think really Duclair, picking him up, skills aside, I think him being the kind of personality that he is, easygoing, just being a leader, that's really got a lot of the guys jacked up in the locker room. And you saw it on Saturday when they dropped 7 goals on the Flyers. So, if they pick up a win here and there against this big set of teams that I talked about, all 3 that are all contenders to win the Stanley Cup, I mean, that's really going to help this team mentally going forward, because as we saw before the trade deadline, guys were defeated. They were skating back to the benches between shifts with their heads down. So, to be able to bring in that fresh new life, that's going to be a huge deal for this team going forward.
All right, Adam, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find the podcast and where they can find you on social media?
Well, you can find the podcast wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. I've very much enjoyed all the comments we've been getting. A lot of people saying that they don't like the Duclair trade. Well, how about that goal? How about them apples, right, Lightning fans? So you go ahead, comment on any video below that you see when you come to the page. The most recent one would be more helpful than not. Throw us your questions, throw us your comments. We'd love to hear. And as I often do on the show, I love to answer them right off the bat. So go ahead and do that. And if you want to reach out to me directly, go ahead on Twitter or X at DenkyDank, DenkyD8NK. So hopefully, we'll be talking more about how the Lightning are looking more like a playoff team every single day rather than, them back to their old ways.
All right, Adam, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You could even pick who's going to win it all. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. And it's not just college hoops. Hockey fans, check out all the latest odds and prop bets for your favorite hockey team as well. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/lockedon, and bet on college hoops till they tear down the nets. Well, the Winnipeg Jets were very active at the trade deadline. Harrison Lee of Locked On Winnipeg Jets joins us to talk about that. And Harrison, how pleased were you with the two major moves the Jets made at the deadline?
In a phrase, couldn't be happier. I think it's exactly what I wanted. The Jets paid almost nothing for it, and apparently, I mean, you can get some fantastic rentals for what amounts to pocket lint. I mean, I really have zero complaints whatsoever.
Yeah, no, got to be happy with it. And which of the two deals were you more pleased with? I know one made more headlines than the other.
I think Toffoli makes the most sense. I think for what the Jets need and honestly what they've struggled with recently, he's probably an even better fit. I like Colin Miller a lot, and I think he'll do nicely for Winnipeg. But honestly, like the blue line, there's a couple of things that they need to fix with it, but they weren't going to fix it without getting like a Chikrin or something. So Miller's great. I like him. But Toffoli, definitely the best of the two.
I mean, everyone needs a right shot defenseman, right? I mean, it seems to. Where do you see Tyler Toffoli fitting into the Jets lineup?
I'm pretty sure he's going to play alongside Monahan and Ehlers. That's not where I'd like him to play, but I mean, well, actually, I'd be fine with him playing with Monahan. You know me, I always want Ehlers in the top line. I thought it would be cool to see maybe a Velarde, Toffoli, and Monahan trio, but I don't think we're going to see that. So he'll probably play with Ehlers and Monahan. It'll be interesting to see how that unit goes because Toffoli is not exactly the fastest skater, but he doesn't really need to be. He's just a really smart player who, you know, he knows where he needs to be. He gets up the ice well. And I think Nick is probably going to do a lot of that transition work. So it should be a nice fit. He's a very trigger-happy kind of player, and that's exactly what the Jets need.
So who do you think in the Jets lineup benefits the most from Toffoli's acquisition, and who do you think will see a little less ice time and maybe be affected negatively by it?
That's a tough one. I don't know if anyone's necessarily going to see a demotion. Iafallo and Appleton will probably get pushed a little bit further down the depth chart, although Appleton just plays infinity minutes anyways every game, so he's probably not too worried. Iafallo will probably move to the fourth line, which is great because I think that's where they'll really do a great defensive job alongside Nemesnikov and Barron. In terms of who probably benefits the most, probably Monahan. I think he'd love to have somebody other than Iafallo who's a great finisher. You know, Monahan needs a new contract. He wants those counting stats and box scores. And just in general, it's just nice to have another top six scorer. That's something the Jets have really struggled with this year. They don't have a lot of finishing talent. So the power play, especially the second power play unit, and, you know, Monahan would probably love to have that. Ehlers probably would love to have somebody who's a really smart player to be finishing off these opportunities. I swear Ehlers dishes up like 4 or 5 point-blank chances, and it's always to like Brendan Dillon or something. And, you know, he'd probably like at some point to have somebody who can actually convert these chances.
What kind of a message do these two trades send to the locker room and to the fan base in Winnipeg?
I think the biggest thing is that the Jets are finally, a little bit belatedly, but finally acknowledging this is the chance that they need to take. Winnipeg has basically gone all in without necessarily giving up anything too crazy. I was shocked that they didn't touch any of their prospects. The draft picks that they gave up were pretty modest, and, you know, none of their big, you know, 3 or 4 prospects that everyone talks about were moved, which is fantastic. So, you know, the Jets are secure both in the present and the future, which is great because, like, this core, you know, there's not a lot of time left. And, you know, looking at the playoff field, the Jets have one of the best one of the hardest, but probably one of the best routes towards a cup run. So if ever there's a time to go for it, this is the message that they wanted to send.
You mentioned that this may be the last chance for this group. Which players do you think are not likely to be back, and where does the team, you know, how do you think they look come October?
So Ehlers is one that I have questions about because he's only got 1 year left on his deal. And with the way that he's been used and kind of been in the doghouse with the coaching staff, you know, it'd be one thing if it was just a 1 season sort of deal, but everyone knows Ehlers has been used incorrectly for years now. So, you know, at some point I worry that, you know, maybe at the next trade deadline he gets moved. In terms of other players that I don't expect back, once Schmidt's deal is done after, I think, next season, or is it this season? One of these 2 years, he'll probably be on his way out. Pionk, I don't know. He might come back. The Jets really seem to love him. As much as I wish I loved him, I'd probably prefer that maybe they change that arrangement. But everyone else I think is probably coming back. Kyle Connor's got like another 2 years total, but KFC, that's a bigger question. I think the Jets at some point should explore trading him because it's clear the way that they want to play hockey and the way that he does, not really aligning right now. So tough one.
What are the keys now to success for this Winnipeg Jets team down the stretch and then in the playoffs?
Probably the biggest thing is that they're just going to want to create more offensive opportunities, especially at even strength. They do an okay job of it now, but they don't really get into the most dangerous areas. That's where Toffoli should be a huge help. I also think that they have to really figure out the top line. The top line did get broken up in the last game, but like at that point, no one even cared. I mean, they were already down like 5-0. So what difference did it make? But I don't know if it's Scheifele who's saying that he wants to play with Connor or if it's really on the coaching staff making that decision. But at some point, somebody's going to have to kind of put on the adult pants and say it's not working. Whether Scheifele wants it or the coaching staff wants it, there's just too much evidence that combo is dragging everyone else down. If you're going to keep them together, you got to play them with Ehlers because Nick is the only guy who can do it. That top line kind of trickles down to all of these other problems. And if they fix it, things are going to look a lot better because they're getting better on the power play. The PK is still trash, but that's, it is what it is. At least the goaltending is held up really well. So you solve the top line. That's probably your last biggest hurdle to get over.
Give me one unsung player who you think is very vital to this Jets team going on a playoff run.
It's weird to call him unsung because I think he's starting to get more attention, but Josh Morrissey has kind of put the team on his back. I know Scheifele has had some of those shifts recently, but if there's somebody night in and night out who's doing that routinely and is playing really the best hockey of his career at almost a Norris level, it's got to be Josh. Even compared to last year, this season, he's just really rounded out his defensive game. He's carving up opponents easily. I mean, this is the most confident we've ever seen him. So when I saw him sucking against the Canucks, I knew, it's just not our night. If even Josh, has a bit of a slowness to his game, you're just not going to win the game because Josh is so pivotal to everything this team does. He's been really a game changer for the Jets this year. And, that gamble they made so many years ago on that long-term deal, it sure is paying off now.
All right, Harrison, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
So Locked On Winnipeg Jets is available on YouTube and, of course, all of your favorite podcasting platforms, Spotify, Megaphone, or no longer Megaphone. We've got a few other platforms, Apple as well. You can find that there, and you can also find me on social media at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets on X.
All right, Harrison, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. I want to thank my guest today, Chris Gawlik of Locked On Vegas Golden Knights. I want to thank Adam Denker of Locked On Lightning, and of course, Harrison Lee of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of the show. I also co-host the Friday edition of Locked On NHL with Rachel Donner. I want to thank everyone who made Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget, we are here every day, Monday through Friday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the National Hockey League. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.